In this video, I want to just begin to talk a little bit about Aquinas and his views on hypocrisy. Now, one of the great difficulties of reading Aquinas, and there are many, but one of the great difficulties is getting used to the way Aquinas lays out his discussion. It's highly structured. It's a scholastic style of writing, and it takes a little bit to getting used to, but one of the advantages of it is everything is laid out very clearly. So once you're comfortable with all this structure, it's easy to find very particular things that Aquinas is talking about. It's easy to find what he thinks other people have said before him about a given topic. How he shifts to introduce his own ideas, how he also addresses certain objections. Everything is highly structured and numbered. So once you get around the, sort of all the structure and you become comfortable and you kind of internalize it, and it does happen if you spend some time with Aquinas, you'll find that it's actually quite interesting to read. And what seems to be at the outset when you start reading it kind of a dry and kind of dusty and arid sort of discussion of abstract principles is actually loaded with a fair amount of passion and real intensity. And we should keep in mind that this book that we're going to look at this little snippet of is the Summa Theologiae or Summa Theologica, various, but that tends to be more now pronounced as Theologiae. It really was a guidebook. Aquinas was writing it for people to go and use in debates with infidels, basically anybody who was outside of the Catholic Church of the time. So this is in the Middle Ages, and so we're talking a long time ago. And Aquinas says, here's a guidebook for you to look things up. It really wasn't to be read certainly not like a novel. It's more like an encyclopedia where you would dip in and go, hey, I'm having arguments with the infidels about the existence of God. What do I do? Well, you look it up and you find out where Aquinas says, what God is, how we prove the existence of God, his 5 ways to God and all that stuff. Oh, I want to look up things on virtue. Well, okay, well then go to the section of the Summa that discusses virtue. So think of it kind of like an encyclopedia that you'll dip into in various places. However, the whole work is constructed like a kind of a giant process, right? Of starting off with God and then redemption and souls and all that, and then the return to God. So it has a giant sense of unity, but it's probably not something that most people would read in that way. But you could, and it's a fantastic read no matter what. Always worth reading Aquinas. So getting used to it, it's always worth it. Okay, so a little bit more on this structure, okay, because we're looking at the second part of the second part. So there's different parts of the Summa, so you kind of get used to that. And our topic is question 111. Now, I want to make a few comments on sort of how Aquinas structures, some of the sort of this microstructure. So there's the large scale structure of the whole work, and then there's smaller scale structures, and we'll get a little bit of a taste by looking at Aquinas on hypocrisy. Because one of the things you have to remember is that overall, although I mentioned it's like an encyclopedia, also think of, like if you were reading an encyclopedia, what's it about? It's about the world. And the world all fits together. So the entries in the encyclopedia have to fit together because the whole thing is trying to reflect the world, right? It's an encyclopedia. And so all the questions that you ask about the world and how the world all fits together is supposedly mirrored in this work. Same thing for the Summa. So, but for us, what that creates is a bit of a problem because you can say something like this. Well, if you just dip in, although that's kind of what it's okay to do that, but you always got to be careful because if you just dip into a certain spot and say, oh, I'm going to read Aquinas just this little passage here, right? Just dip in. I'm not reading all around it. I'm just reading this thing. There's always a danger of not getting the full context because everything is contextualized in the Summa. So in the end, if you really want to get a good grasp of Aquinas' thought, and I wish you good luck in doing that because he's such a monster figure. It's just huge how much he wrote. You're kind of stuck, reading it all. So we always take, very carefully when you read a part of Aquinas, right, to not really think, oh, well, this is Aquinas' final word, because you have to read it in context, and that's not always easy to do. But at the risk of violating context, we have to do it. And I'll have a look at that as we go along. So, okay, so our question is 111, and it's on dissimulation and hypocrisy. So Aquinas is going to examine these two things. Now, okay, so if you look here, you'll see that I put up question 111, dissimulation and hypocrisy. Now, a couple of things to think about here. Aquinas' works break up into questions, and then questions you'll see have articles, and each article each article poses a question, and then there's 4 objections. Then you'll see like the 4 objections, then on the contrary, and then an I answer that. That's Aquinas stepping in, and then reply to each of the objections. So that's the basic structure. And so we kind of have 2 things that we call questions, which can be a little bit confusing. Now, I'm just going to say that think of this as the question 111. That's kind of like your topic question. Dissimulation and hypocrisy. It's not really phrased as a question, but that's our topic to be questioned, right? The topic to be questioned is dissimulation and hypocrisy. And then the articles are like are very specific questions. So in this sense, if you look, Article 1, there's a total of 4 articles in the topic question 111. There's 4 articles, but Article 1 is all dissimulation is sin. Article 2 is hypocrisy, dissimulation. Article 3 is hypocrisy opposed to truth, and Article 4 is it a mortal sin? So you have your topic question, right, dissimulation, and then you have 4 article questions. So you kind of keep that straight. And then in each article question, right, in each article, so as we see whether all dissimulation is a sin, so have a look at that, you'll see that you have your objections, your 4 objections, right? It seems that not all dissimulation is a sin, blah, 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 blah. And then objection 2, no sin is profitable, blah, 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 blah. And he'll go on, therefore not all dissimulation is a sin. So it will try to establish one position in the set of objections at the beginning, like objections 1 to 4 are trying to establish a certain kind of position, and then Aquinas will say, on the contrary, and then as he puts in, a gloss on Isaiah, so he's got biblical things are mixed in with references to the philosopher. By the philosopher, he means Aristotle, but he also quotes from everybody, like at least it seems to be that Thomas Aquinas has read everybody. He's just pulling out quotes. He pulls quotations out of the Bible, then he pulls quotations out of Aristotle, not too much out of Plato, but he pulls quotations out of various authors and interpreters and commentators on the Bible as well. So he'll set up then this sort of objection from 1 to 4, which is basically answering, the first one is all dissimulation a sin, and he says, oh, well, these 4 objections say no, not all of it. And then Aquinas will say, on the contrary, in 3 years, he blah, blah, blah. He quotes Isaiah, and then he says, therefore, dissimulation is always a sin. And then I answer that, and then he carries on with this now. So first part says it's not always a sin. He goes, oh, yeah. On the contrary, it is always a sin. And I answer that, and then I'm going to go and reply to each objection. So that's your general structure, is you read sort of the topic, your topic question, that gets the big Q, and, dissimulation and hypocrisy, and then your articles, which are your topic, your questions about that topic. And then in each article, it subdivides into objections. On the contrary, I answer that, and then reply to the objections. So think about that. You try to get that in your head, roughly how the structure works. But it's always this sort of nested boxes, right? The big topic, then a particular question about the topic, and then objections, and then a response to those objections. That's really the structure. It's not much more than that. However, it's easy to get lost in all this stuff when you read it. But if you take the time and get used to the structure, it's quite a dare I say it, a fairly punchy little exercise to read Aquinas, because you get used to this very clearly stated objections and very clearly stated replies. And Aquinas is doing, he's mixing all kinds of things in there. So like you got biblical quotations with biblical commentators, Aristotle, a lot of stuff is flying around. But if you take the time, it's quite a fascinating read and well worthwhile. Okay, so again, in the next video, what I'm going to do is look a little bit more of where this now fits into a slightly larger context, because this question 111, dissimulation and hypocrisy, fits into a section of the Summa that is, it really fits into his discussion of prudence and justice, right? So it fits into the larger concept of prudence and justice, and it basically follows a discussion of truth, and then of course it's going to look at truth and vices that are opposed to truth. So Aquinas is going to look a little bit at truth and then vices that are opposed to truth. And one of the vices opposed to truth, of course, is going to be lying. Not surprising, no surprise there. And another vice that's opposed to truth will be basically this. So this is going to fit in to Aquinas' discussion of prudence, justice, and truth. So again, you've got to be careful of where he puts things, because it resonates with what he's trying to say. So in the next video, I'll look a little bit more about the specific sort of this, shall we say, this little discourse on truth and the vices opposed to it, which contains our topic question, and sort of at the risk of sort of isolating it. But I'll dig into that next video. See you there.